let's turn over. Let's turn over to 1 Samuel. We'll be in start in chapter 2. What we're learning in this series, in this quarter, is good lessons from bad guys. And the bad guys, this lesson today is Eli's sons, and their names are I had it right here in front of me. I can't even say it. Hophni and Phineas. Okay. Now, as we're turning over there, as we learn these things, these are more than just stories. There's a reason why God retained these stories for us. Now, this is a long time ago, under different customs, different part of the world, different setting. So, but they're retained for us so we can learn something from them. So as we go through these lessons, as we read these lessons, we need to see how it applies today. And if you know, sometimes it gets very, very, it can get political, I guess you might say. It can get very touchy. You can maybe step on some people's toes. But it needs to be said, it needs to be thought about, it needs to be prayed about. Okay, as a prelude to what we in the book of Samuel, there are especially in chapter 1 of 1 Samuel, there's this woman named Hannah that was barren and came to Eli, who was the prophet at that time, or judge at the time, and he came and said, I'm barren, and she said, if I was able to have a son, I will devote this man, or not my son, to the Lord. In fact, she was willing to give the son to be raised by Eli. And in chapter 2, there's the Hannah's song of thanksgiving. And so, of course, a son is born to her. But then in verse 2, verse 12, it's about the sin of Eli's sons. Now remember who Eli is, of course. Now, he's the priest. He's the man of God. Let's start in verse 12 of chapter 2. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord. And the custom of the priest with the people, when any man was offering a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling with a 3-pronged fork in his hand. Then he would thrust it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and all that the fork brought up the priest would take for himself. Thus they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, give the priest meat for roasting, as he will not take boiled meat from you, only raw. Now, so right there, you can see that what they're doing is it's totally against the law. We can have references, we can go back and look at all this. But even they were doing this for their own gain, for their own gluttony, for their own pleasure. They were just ignoring the law that God had set down, even to the point to where they would not be able to burn off the fat. Now if the man is in verse 16, so they had some opposition. If the man said to him, they must surely burn the fat first and then take as much as you desire, then he would say, no, but you shall give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Okay, so what they were doing is they were pretty much bullying and, taking their position that they had just for their own advantage. And I'm sure you never heard of anybody doing that today, right? Of course we do. We have a lot of examples in our country, in our jobs, and I hate to say it, sometimes you'd see it in the church, okay, unfortunately. But it happens. It happened then, it happens now. And even if they had some opposition, said, hey, this isn't right, okay? This is against the law. We know better. You should know better. But they said, if you don't do it, we'll take it by force. So they were being bullies in that respect. And if you notice, then it was not just the brothers were the head guys, but it was the priest servant that was doing this. So there was more than one guy that was in on this. Okay. Now, in verse 17, thus the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for the men despised the offering of the Lord. Now, this one verse has been discussed, and there's different opinions as to what it means by men. Some say, well, it's the two sons of Eli, those two men. Others say it was the young men, the sons of Israel. Okay, and the author, that the book that we're reading, he's of the opinion, or it's his. He said the different tenses, the different terminologies. He takes the role or takes the position that it was the young men of Israel. In other words, they were allowing this to go on. We saw one sacrifice may have come and said, hey, this isn't right, kind of stood up to him. But as a general rule, the other men just allowed it to happen. Okay, now that is the author's position. Okay, and we can have some discussion about this. I'm not saying, and if you think about it, that's the lesson to us, is what do we allow to happen? Okay, what do we allow to seep in? What do we allow to kind of take over? We just got through and coming out of a Christmas season, okay, and I was watching Christmas Eve night, watching the Catholic. I wasn't watching all, just kind of interested because we've been there. We've been to St. Peter's Cathedral, and it was neat to see the things that we saw. But I also felt sorry for the people that are in attendance because of they're following a Catholic religion. Well, how much do we allow that just to kind of, because it's very, very subtle. How much do we allow that? And I'm not talking about Christmas season. I'm talking about in general. How much do we allow that into our lives? Okay, if you think about the holidays, Christmas, Easter, well, even St. Valentine's Day, okay? Some of these are Christian holidays, Christian events that we have just accepted, okay? And that's just one facet that I'm talking about. That's just one area. How many do we let in without even giving it a second thought? And is this the same type of setting? Could we sit back and say, well, hey, those guys are doing wrong. We can't do anything about it. They'll get their reward. They'll get their punishment in their due time. Is there any time that we can stand up and have something to say? And sometimes if nothing is said about any of this, then it's as if we accept it. Right. Well, I hope that everyone feels that same way. Thank you for saying that. Well, let's go on. Let's keep that in mind, and let's jump down to. By the way, Samuel has already been born. Samuel is in the household, and he sees all this. Okay, and it's really kind of. Let's see how Eli responds to this. And by the way, 18 through 21, Eli is blessing Hannah, and the father is Elkanah and his wife Hannah, and they say, "May the Lord give you children from this woman in place of the one she dedicated to the Lord." And they went on their way. So the Lord's blessing them. She had 3 sons and 2 daughters. So because of her dedication to the Lord, because of her prayer, because of that that devotion, the Lord blessed her with more children. And now in verse 22, now Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who served at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And he said to them, "Why do you do such things, the evil things that I hear from all these people?" So there are people that are saying, hey, these guys are bad guys. Eli's hearing about it. But we'll talk about Eli here in a little bit more. But he does go to them. He said, "Why are you doing these things?" No, my sons, for the report is not good for which I hear the Lord's people circulating. And if one man sins against another, God will remediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for the Lord desired to put them to death. Okay, let's talk about that today. Okay, how many of you have children? Okay, how many of those children have disappointed you at one point in time? You know, I mean, we don't need to come out specifics, but there are times when they make the decision that you wouldn't make, and sometimes you got to be there to pick them up. And no, I'm glad there's a gap, so there's no elbowing going on here. But it happens, okay, and it happens, and you can grow from that. But here is Eli, very disappointed. I mean, this is really, really tough. But let's look at this. Uh, the report is not good, which I hear the Lord's people circulating. Circulating kind of gives me saying, well, they're talking about it. They're not necessarily coming to Eli saying, hey, that's one thing that we could probably say. Or is Eli just coming to his sons because the people are talking about it? Okay. What can we do if and I mean, I'm talking to myself as well. What can children do something that is that is damaging to their souls? That is maybe hurting and circulating and damaging other people's. Are they doing something that would bring bad a bad name to the church? Whatever it is, what is our role as parents? What are we to do? Yeah. So now the next question is, we know that we're going to do it, that we would do it. The next question is when. When do we do it? And I'm thinking, as we're going to read on later on in here, Eli came to his sons, but it might have been too late. Might have been too late. Well, definitely was. So the answer to the question to us is, when do we do it?
Get mad about it or whatever. I mean, I don't just want that. Who cares? I mean, most of the time they're getting mad because they know that they're wrong, and then eventually, hopefully, their hearts will change and they'll realize that they were telling them that because they loved them and they
Well, I've seen in TV shows. I've probably even said it myself. Okay, or thought it myself. I got 3 daughters that married well, so God blessed us in that respect. Are they perfect? No. Are my daughters perfect? No. And so, but still, they married well, and thank God for that. But there were times when we thought, well, we're, I guess our first son-in-law, we had doubts about, and after 27 years, he's part of the family, of course. Well, I think the verdict is still, that we're still in the judges, we're still in the jury room. No, honestly, there are times when we thought, well, if we say something, she's going to run off with him anyway. And that, to me, after I think back about it, that's not something we should have done. And But I mean, God was in control in that respect because it turned, they got a good family. But my point is this: so many times we've said, well, we kind of back off. Well, if we do this, then this will happen. That shouldn't be our guide. Should be the Lord is our guide. And if this is something that we think is going to be dangerous to the family, dangerous to church, dangerous for whatever, we should say something that moment, at that time. Now, huh? And it's tough on you too. Oh, yeah. You can see yourself doing it. Yeah. Well, that does bring up the next point. Where you kind of get a little lead into that. Is we're talking about doing it now? Then was Eli was Eli paying attention to his sons when he was doing his work for the Lord, when he was doing his priestly duties and his judging duties? Was he doing, or was he too focused on his work? I mean, I'm probably guilty of that, probably more than something I regret. And Satan always kind of reminds me, you ought to regret this. You ought to regret this. And, it's never too late to turn around and go the right direction. But I felt like for 40 years, I probably, well, 35 at least, I spent way too much time in my career and left the raising of my kids to my wife. Okay. I'd come home and, bark my orders on the weekends and then go back to work. And there was a lot of times that I would spend a lot of time away from home because of, supporting the family, doing what I need to do as a man, doing what that. And the author has a long story that he puts out in his book about how he worked for NASA, and this realization came to him when he was offered a job that he could have progressed in his career. It would have been a very prestigious role that he would go into, and then it just struck him that if he had done that, it would take him away from his family more than where he was already. So he turned it down, and he spent more time with his family. And that takes a courageous man to do something like that. And I'm not saying I was always away from home, but then in my career with where I am now, I was gone a lot. And but preachers can do that too. Elders can get into that. Anybody can working in missionaries can do that. They can get into Lord's work so involved that they forget their family. Okay. Okay. And raising to at least one parent, and praise God for Joe because she raised her 3 girls. And I even got to the point of saying, I don't know what to do to raise girls. Okay. I don't know how to do that, but they need that father. And so things have turned around in our lives. So it's good because I've been at home now for the last 6.5 years, and it's been good. Even though they're out of the house, it's been good. But if you can take that, if you can see a young person, even now that has kids at home, you encourage them that the family comes first. The Lord will always provide. You know, you'd always provide. And sometimes your career doesn't really turn out the way you think it's going to anyway. All right. I'm reminded of one of the things I really like about the St. Paul Urban Ministry. The men that we, or the families we work with, the Hmong people. I'll always remember this, that we are up there. It's been a year and a half ago. We had a men's retreat, and I think maybe I mentioned this in the pulpit one time when I was showing about the ministry. There's this one natural leader. I call him the natural leader. He's just kind of one of those guys that just takes the lead. And when we're at the retreat, each one of them were saying, you know, how God has helped them in their lives and what they've done, and why are they making this commitment to family and all. And here he is, 32, 33 years old, something like that, and young man. And he came to him, he says, I feel like I only have about 7 years left. I go, good grief, is he sick? What's he doing? Then he points down to his 6-year-old boy. He goes, I have about 7 years to make an impact in his life for him to continue on. So 6 plus 7 is 13. Isn't that the formative years? Such wisdom from that statement, such wisdom from that man to say something like that, and it impacted all of us. Okay, and he's taking the right route. Then he turns around and goes off for the weekend on hunting trip, you know, by himself. But no, honestly, but you know what I'm saying? That statement has stuck with me because he realized a role of a father in a family. Okay, and the role of a parent, the teamwork, and so. Could Eli have done something better? Could he have done something different? And I'm thinking we're going to see here that he could have. Um, Now he was wise. Now think about this. He did a poor job with his sons, or at least him. Now I don't know if he had other sons and daughters, but he had these two that were bad. But who was still growing up in under his tutelage? Who was he leading? Samuel. Now wait a minute, God. This guy blew it with these two sons, and you're giving him Samuel for him to train and to raise. Well, let's read this. 26. Now the boy Samuel was growing in stature and in favor both with the Lord and with men. So, um, so anyway, he still entrusted Samuel to be under the guidance of Eli. And in verse 27, a man of God came to Eli and said to him, Thus says the Lord, did I not indeed reveal myself to the house of your father when they were in Egypt in bondage to Pharaoh's house? Did I not choose them from all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar to burn incense, to carry an ephod before me, and I did not give to the house of your father all the fire offerings of the sons of Israel? Why do you kick at my sacrifice and at my offering, which I have commanded in my dwelling, and honor your sons above me by making yourselves fat with the choices of every offering of my people of Israel? So it wasn't just the sons that were doing it. Eli was too. He was. Did Samuel do the same thing? What do you mean? We're going to get to that, where they were killed in battle. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Did I say Samuel? No, I said Eli. Okay. Oh, Samuel's sons did the same thing. Okay. All right. But anyway, I'm saying that we'll notice here in a few minutes that Eli, he was he was a fat guy. Okay. Now, as you stand up here, and regardless of how much I try to hide it, you know, my stature, I didn't get this way overnight, and Eli didn't get fat overnight. Okay. Um, and unfortunately, I don't wake up every morning and say, okay, I'm slim. And that doesn't work that way. So it doesn't happen overnight. So these things did not happen overnight with Eli as well. Okay. Uh, let's skip on over. Yeah, exactly. In fact, exactly. And so there's a prophetic. Now we don't know this man of God came to Eli. Eli was a man of God. So, but there's evidently, there's more than one, of course. But we don't know who this man of God is. We don't know his name. At least I don't know in this. But anyway, God sent him to Eli and told him about what he was doing and all he was doing wrong. And it has a prophetic down in 34. This will be the sign to you which shall come concerning your two sons, Hophni and hope I say that right, Hophni and Phineas. On the same day, both of them shall die. But I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and in my soul. And I will build him an enduring house, and he will walk before my anointed always. And it shall come about that everyone who is left in your house shall come and bow down to him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread and say, please assign to me one of the priest's offices that I may eat a piece of bread. Okay, so let's skip on over to chapter 4. Um, and as you're turning over there, just, this is talking about, chapter 3 is talking about Samuel's calling. He was a young man, and God called to him 3 times, and then Eli said, go back to bed. And then the 4th time, Eli said, hey, or when he calls to you again, say, here am I. So it was the Lord calling to him. But down in verse 19 of that chapter, Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fail. And all Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, because the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. And now we're going to get into a battle in chapter 4 and chapter 4 and 5 that the Philistines take the ark in victory. So they're at battle right now, and the Philistines are beating up on the Israelites. Okay, they're beating them, and they said about 4,000 soldiers fell that day. So they came back and they said, the Lord's not with us. What's going on? And so they had a good idea. In verse 3 of chapter 4, when the people came into the camp, the elders of Israel said, why has the Lord defeated us today before the Philistines? Let us take, it seems to me these guys don't know, they don't read their history very well. Okay. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, about why the Israelites fail in battle. Anyway, let us take to ourselves from Shiloh the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that it may come among us and deliver us from the power of our enemies. Now, are they really calling on the power on God to do so? What are they doing? What? Good luck charm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. Okay. And hey, let's get our good luck charm that's worked in the past. It's helped us in the past. They went, if it was meant to them that they were paying homage, why didn't they take it in the first place? Because they felt they said, oh, we can do this. Oh, the Lord's always with us. How many times have we said that? Hey, we're going to go into this, and we're decided to do this. We're going to go headlong into this, and Lord's going to bless it, instead of going to the Lord first and say, Lord, what do you want me to do? How do you want us to do? Um, and so, yeah, exactly. And that's the way I felt. I've heard other preachers say this too, that the Ark of Covenant to them had turned into a good luck charm. And that is not paying homage, the proper respect to God. They got defeated again. Hophni and Phineas were with the Ark of the Covenant. Well, the Philistines came and captured the Ark and took it with them, even though they were scared of it. They were, when they heard this shout, came into camp, and all the army shouted, and they said, "Hey, they kind of got concerned. They nothing, not that they believed that the Ark of the Covenant carried any magical powers other than the magical power, of regenerating the Israelites. And they said that they were superstitious people too, so they really realized that there was something, if nothing else, just the energy boosted by the Israelites, and so they understood that came in, but they went and stole it, and they killed the two sons of Eli at that time. Uh, in verse 12 of chapter 4. Now a man of Benjamin ran from the battle line and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes torn and dust on his head. And when he came, behold, Eli was sitting on his seat by the road, eagerly watching, because his heart was trembling for the ark of God. So the man came to tell it in the city, and all the city cried out. When I read this, I thought to myself, if he was so concerned about the ark, couldn't he? I mean, Eli evidently had started out maybe good, okay, in his young age, but he'd grown very weak, I guess, over age. And why did he say you can't take the ark? You're not going to take the ark for that purpose, or whatever. He turned into a pretty weak man, from what I can understand. But he was still trembling because of the ark of God was out there. 14, when Eli heard the noise of the outcry, he said, "What does the noise of this commotion mean?" Then the man came hurriedly and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set so that he could not see. He was blind. And the man said to Eli, "I am the one who came from the battle line. Indeed, I escaped from the battle line today." And he said, "How did things go, my son?" Then the one who brought the news answered and said, "Israel has fled before the Philistines. There has been a great slaughter among the people. Your two sons, Hophni and Phineas, are dead, and the ark of God has been taken." And when it came about, when he mentioned the ark of God, that Eli fell off the seat backward beside the gate, and his neck was broken, and he died, for he was old and heavy. Thus he judged Israel for 40 years. And so here's the death of Eli. Could he have done something different? Well, and when you first start reading this, as we mentioned, there are many good, godly ministers of the Bible, ministers of the church. There are good, godly men, leaders that have sons and daughters that go, could we have done something? Eli evidently could have done something different, or God would not have brought this. I don't think he brought it on him. And that's a lesson to us. So he could have done something, and he didn't. And even on, it goes on down about his daughter-in-law. She gave birth when she heard all about this. So our lesson today to us is, now, by the way, if you go on down into chapter 5, I'm not going to bring this up. Maybe I'll mention it, but it's really kind of funny, like some comical events that happened in chapter 5 when the Ark of Covenant went into a temple, and their idol fell and broke, and so they moved it to another city, and turmoil came on to that. So the Ark of the Covenant, God was with that ark, So it was proven that the ark was there, but the children of Israelites did not at that time, that they did not respect it as they should have, and so they were still defeated. But God was defending that ark and showing to the Philistines that he means business. So he took it to 3 different places, and all 3 of those places were idols were falling over. They were getting tumors and being ill, till finally the Philistines say, "Take it back, get it out of our country." So it's kind of funny to read that. Okay, so what lessons can we learn from these 2 bad guys? And we say, talked about the 2 bad guys, 2 sons. We can't exclude Eli, because how easy it is to start off well in a ministry. Okay, even in ministry, how many times have we read time and time again where we have a young minister or something starting in a ministry, that doesn't keep his focus. He gets into programs, he gets into the budget of the church, he gets into all kinds of things that are not, he's diverted. And Satan's very sly. Satan's very subtle. He will come in undetected, and before you know it, we're trapped into something that we didn't intend. If it was blatant, then we could all stand. But it's very, very subtle. So, what lessons do we take from this, as parents, as members of the congregation of Green Lawn, as members of a community, members of a country? What is our role? What do we do? Okay. Any comments? Because we only got about 5 minutes left. But if there's no other comments, that's our lesson for the day. And one thing I wanted to do when I started this series that I have not done, and I apologize for that. And then I was out last week. Our next lesson next week is going to be on Doeg, Doeg, and so look him up, find out more about Doeg, and we'll find some more lessons, good lessons from bad guys. Okay, and good crowd. Thanks for the courage coming back. Appreciate you. Yeah. So we're praying for you. What part of Oklahoma? What part of Oklahoma? Okay. All right. Yes. Wow. Okay. Daniel and the travelers. When y'all leaving? Okay. All right. Yeah. Be careful up there. And the Turner. I didn't mention the Turners, but Shauna and Emma had been here. They got here before Thanksgiving, and I kept before Thanksgiving, and she was going to be here and take care of the family and take care of her grandmom while Rex was going through his treatments, and so that's over, and she was going to come for Thanksgiving and go back and then come back for Christmas, but as it turned out, it's best for her just to stay the whole time. So she's been here. They've been not coming to. They've been streaming because of his treatments and stuff. So, but she'll be leaving Tuesday. Go back up there, and so it just kind of. I pray for them and their travels as well. All right. Thank you very much.